What's going on, everybody? This is the Uncanny Omar from Near Mint Condition, and today, finally, I get to do my overview of Catwoman of East End Omnibus from DC Comics. Let's get started. When I said it's finally here, I don't just mean this overview. Yes, my original omnibus of Catwoman was lost in the mail, and I finally got it after almost a month. I'm sure videos are out there already, but for those of you that have been asking, it is finally here. But what I mean by it's finally here is that this was one of my most wanted Omnis. If you've been watching my channel for a while, you know that I've had this Omni on my most wanted list for a few years. And when I read it the first time, I read it in the crappy trade paperbacks that kind of fell apart. I think I ended up giving them to my brother. But anyway, I was like, oh, surely one day we're going to get this in omnibus format. So I don't need to upgrade to those big, thick trades. I still upgraded. But here we are. Catwoman. Not by Ed Brubaker Omnibus, but it's called Catwoman of East End Omnibus. Here is the cover. Beautiful drawing here by Darwin Cook. This is the type of artwork you're going to find in here. So if for some reason this is not for you, this cover, then you may want to stay away from this omnibus. But I don't know why, because you would be missing out on one of the greatest story arcs that DC has ever put out. I love the simplicity yet complexity of this spine Catwoman of East End Omnibus. Ed Brubaker, Darwin Cook. Selina down there jumping on top of the DC logo. Love it. And then the back cover here. The retail price being $100. Here's little bit of like what the book is, what people think of the book. Catwoman is dead, or at least that's what she wants you to think. So I get the fact why they didn't call this Catwoman by Ed Brubaker, because one of the stories, actually the very first story that's collected in here, is by Darwin Cook. But here is what the inside of the covers look like, or under the dust jacket. I think this is from issue number 2, and this is from issue number 1 of the new ongoing Catwoman series. The spine, oh, they're using different pictures here. Nice. And then the back, another Darwin Cook piece. All right, we're going to open this up, take a look at the artwork, because Darwin Cook is not the only artist that worked on the book. I mean, obviously, they gave credit also to the legendary Paul Gulatchi, and then Cameron Stewart up here. But there's also Mike Allred and Michael Avon Oeming and Javier Pulido, just a few artists that also worked on the book. And we're going to be talking about the story and when this takes place. All right, let's get this open. Some black end paper there. Catwoman of East End. Gorgeous picture there by Darwin Cook. And here are all the creators. All the pencilers, the writers up here. Stephen Grant, I forgot he did some of it in here. Jimmy Palmiotti doing some of the inks. Cameron Stewart, Mike Allred. And then the colorist and also the letterers. Here is your table of contents. So it does kick off with Catwoman, Selina, the big score. It really should just be Selina's big score, but I get it. You know, you gotta sell it on the name. So this does collect Catwoman, Selina's big score number 1. Material from Detective Comics 759 to 762, and Catwoman 1 through 37, as well as Catwoman Secret Files number 1. So the Selina's big score, this particular story is about how Selina's retired. Selina's Catwoman, by the way, for I assume most people know that, but just in case. She's kind of retired. She's given up the life of crime, but something calls her back in. Now, this is all about a train heist, and she's kind of making her own team. So think like Ocean's 11 type of story. But in here, the most important part I thought of this was really cool, is we get to meet a character of Stark. Now, if you know much about Darwin Cook and his work, then you know that he worked on a book series called Parker. And Parker was all written by Richard Stark, which was just a pseudonym for Donald E. Westlake. So I thought that was really cool that he got to write a character named Stark in here. And Stark is kind of like the guy that trained Selina in her past. Now, of course, the other important thing in here is that this does tie into the Ed Brubaker series, because Slam Bradley shows up in here trying to change Selina's ways. And speaking of Slam, let's get to at this beautiful artwork. Those very first few issues of Catwoman by Ed Brubaker, those are all inked by Mike Allred, and it's really cool to see both Darwyn Cooke and Mike Allred work together like that. This are the backup stories. It's called The Trail of the Catwoman, so it is all about Sam Bradley trying to find where she is, even at one time teaming up with the Batman. Now, Slam is a character that predates Batman. He first appeared in Detective Comics #1. He was a cop, he was in the army, and then during this time, he is just a private eye. And he's hired by I think it's the mayor of Gotham to go and find Selina Kyle. So that's what his job is. And then we kick off the actual series of Catwoman. Now, all of this takes place after Nightfall. It takes place after Jim Balent's run on Catwoman. I believe that ran up to like 80 issues or so. So we're getting into the early or late 90s, early aught series. This is when Ed Brubaker and Greg Rucka, they were both writing Batman and Detective Comics. So it's around that era that all of this takes place. This is the beautiful artwork you're going to be seeing in here. Now, this is also the time, like I mentioned, when... Oh, one thing I didn't say, though, is why they called it Selina, the big score. It's because you don't really see Catwoman in here. There's a couple of flashbacks, but it's mainly about Selina Kyle. And in this, it's a big deal because she gets a new costume. And the new costume is designed by Darwyn Cooke. And I love it. I love the new costume. It looks so different than her previous costumes. So during this time, she's kind of given up her ways of the past of crime. And she's trying to use her money for a better tomorrow for the people that she kind of grew up around. So she kind of goes back to her beginnings, the East End of Gotham, which is one of the roughest parts of Gotham. And this is the character of Holly, who you may or may not remember from year 1. But she was living with Selina during Selina's time as a prostitute. And I think it's really cool to bring her back in. And speaking of year 1, you almost get that era in this particular art style. With Darwyn Cooke's art, you kind of get the sense that this does feel more like a noir comic. Kind of like Batman Year 1 or, you know, Batman The Long Halloween, stories like that, than you do what was going on in the 90s. It does feel like a different type of book. And this, I guess what some people would call a minimalist art style, really does wonders for the story. Like, this is some of the best team up I've ever seen in comics as far as a creator, a writer and an artist working together to tell just a wonderful story. So, of course, while Selina is trying to pay for her sins of the past, things go wrong. It seems like somebody knows her secret identity and is trying to tear her apart. And not just her personally, but the people around her. So there are a lot of dark moments in here, especially when you get to her sister Maggie and her husband and the whole story with Black Mask. That stuff gets really dark for a story that's pretty lighthearted from time to time. And the art, man, whether it's Michael Avon Oeming or Javier Pulido, and of course Darwyn Cooke, you also get Cameron Stewart in here. Now, I know some people, you know, when they see or hear that name, they immediately are like, oh, no thanks. And if that's you, I get it. I respect that. But there were a lot more people that worked on this book than just that name. So this is a story about going back and redeeming yourself. Actually, her 90s comics were more about Selina being kind of like the anti-hero and kind of playing everyone. This is more about a redemption arc, not just with the people in her, that she feels like she left behind, like Holly, but also kind of like for herself. Like, she feels like she needs to have a happy ending. And that's kind of where Slam comes in. You know, and the three of them go on a road trip in here. There's a lot of awesome moments in here. And you are going to see some Batman villains. And of course, you are going to see Batman. But it's mainly the three of them. You know, you got characters like the Penguin, Mr. Freeze shows up in here. But then you get some of Batman's allies that show up in here, like Stephanie Brown. Spoiler, she shows up in this. I think this is the issue I was talking about. It was pretty rough. But yes, eventually Darwyn Cooke leaves the book, but you still have similar art style like this. As a matter of fact, the secret files from... Here, let's see. Yes, these right here, The Many Lives of Selina Kyle. These are drawn by Michael Avon Oeming, and then also Javier Pulido does a couple of these. Now, there is a change in art. So about 2/3 of the way in, we do have this gentleman jump in and become the ongoing artist. And this is Paul Gulatchi, and his art is being inked by Jimmy Palmiotti. So it's both of them that have been around in comics for a long time. Of course, Paul being around a lot longer. He's the gentleman that drew Master of Kung Fu. I am going to say something because I feel like I need to say this. One of my pet peeves in the world we live in, and I have a lot because I'm getting older, but one of the ones that really bothers me is when somebody decides to just take a panel or two or three from an artist and just show them on the internet and people make fun of it. Like I've seen it with several artists. I've seen it with Paul Ryan, with John Byrne, Walter Simonson, and even modern artists too. So I saw a couple of years ago. I think it was at a forum that just took like a few panels from Paul's run here on Catwoman, and people were like, "Oh gosh, man, that is a horrible artist. Why would they hire somebody like that to draw a book by Ed Brubaker?" And the thing that bothers me is like you're only taking a few panels from the run and people are just making fun of it. So I think sometimes when people find out what the book is, they're like, "No thanks, I saw the horrible art," or they're like, "Oh, I don't look forward to reading that part of Catwoman." Yes, his art is a lot different, of course. He's older here than he was when he was drawing Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. So his bodies aren't as fluid. They're a little bit stiffer. The movements and action sequences are. But I think he still does a good job. I mean, yes, it's different, of course, than what you got here. Like I said, what I call the minimalist art. Still wonderful, though, when compared to this. But he is still a damn solid artist. The one that really pissed me off, though, and I know I'm going on a tangent here, is the one with Herb Trimpe. It was the art that he was doing in the 90s, and people were just making fun of him. They had no idea how legendary this artist was. Like, I mean, this is the guy that co-created Wolverine, and his art was a lot different. And in the 90s, because he was older, he did change his style up, and I think that's what happened to Paul. Now, Paul is retired these days. I don't think he even draws or goes to conventions anymore. But yeah, that pisses me off when people do that. They just take a few panels, and then people jump in and start making fun of it. And they have no idea how great of an artist some of these people they're making fun of are. So this is what the third arc is right here. This, like I said, it's all by Paul Gulatchi. Now, the only problem I have with this omnibus is that this does tie in. There are a couple of issues that tie in to the War Games story arc. And it is the first time War Games has been collected in oversized format. It's only just a couple of issues. The final issue is Ed Brubaker wrapping up his loose ends. I think it's called Character Driven. Oh, man, and that's what this omnibus is. It's all character-driven. Let's look at the extras here. So all the way in the back here are some of the secret files. These are character bios. There's one for Slam. Tell you where they first appeared, how tall they are, eye colors, gray. He's got gray eye colors? Interesting. This is Holly. Now, Holly, of course, in the next arc by Will Pfeiffer, plays a bigger role. And here are some pinups. I didn't even know Steranko did one. There's one here. Yeah, this one by Steranko is just freaking awesome. The biographies on the actual creators. And then one more picture there by Darwin Cook. The end paper. As far as the binding, one thing I will say before we talk about the binding here is that this, when I opened it up, the Omnis from Marvel and DC all come wrapped in plastic. The plastic they use for this seemed like a cheaper plastic than what DC has been using in the past. So I did get a little bit worried because this is also printed at a different printer. But the only differences I notice is just that the binding is a little tighter. That's a good looking eye. The book has 1,064 pages. But the binding is a little bit tighter. And I stretched that spine a few times. And, DC has gotten a lot better at, the books wanting to close in on you. But it doesn't take... I think it got to the fourth issue before it finally stopped. Yeah, there we go. Before it finally stopped trying to close on me. Not as bad as like things like the first printing of that Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo omnibus. But definitely different than things that they have printed recently. But just in case, you know, the paper quality is still thick, glossy paper that they've been using. It is sewn binding. You saw the eye. The only problem might be that you may have to give it a quick or some multiple read-throughs before the glue finally cracks and it lays over really nice. But one of the greatest Ed Brubaker stories ever. Don't miss out on it, with some classy artwork in here by Darwin Cook and Paul Gulatchi. That is my overview, and that, as they say, is that. If you're interested in purchasing this book, don't forget to check out our sponsor, cheapgraphicnovels.com, your online home for graphic novels and collected editions up to 50% off cover price. They have excellent shipping and prompt and helpful service. Check out their bargain deals for up to 90% off cover price. And don't forget, the CGN also takes pre-orders. That way you don't miss out on the hottest releases. And they are currently running a special promotion for you Minties. If you're a first-time customer, after receiving your order confirmation email, reply back to that email and let them know Near Mint Condition sent you their way. They will then apply a free shipping promotional credit to your next order in the US. Cheap Graphic Novels, your source for the hottest books with the kind of deep discount, quality shipping, and customer service that will keep you coming back for more. And that was the content, the page count, and build of this omnibus. Let me know in the comments down below if you are picking this up, if you have the trades, you're upgrading to this omnibus, if this is your first time reading it, and if this was one of your most wanted DC omnis. For me, it's been on my list for years, and it is finally here. We finally get that Darwin Cook artwork in oversized format. This was the Uncanny Omar. Thank you all so much for watching. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, check out our Patreon and Spreadshop. Amazing ways to support the channel if you can do so. More importantly, all of you, stay healthy and safe out there. Much love.